Please subscribe to this channel and also turn on your notification bell in order to get our latest updates.
We're now joined by Professor Herman Ndofor, who's with the Indiana University Keeley School of Business. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. What do you make of these indictments?
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure always coming on. It is not surprising. I would say it's long overdue because in a conflict situation such as this, we've had so many opportunists who have just wreaked havoc on the population. And kidnapping has really been the #1 malaise that the people in Southern Cameroons have been suffering for probably the past 4 years now across. We believe this is just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. The kidnappings that were mentioned here, if you look at the 4 counts, all of them pretty much rest on kidnapping. And I would mention one of the individuals kidnapped in this particular case was a cardinal, late Cardinal Tumi. And he was probably one of the more known people kidnapped, but almost every day Southern Cameroonians are kidnapped for ransom.
So who are these people? What is their cause?
Well, so I think we have to, there are 3 groups of individuals we have to separate out here. We have to separate out those fighting for the liberation of Southern Cameroon, the restoration fighters, as they are generally known, are sometimes colloquially Amber Boys. We have to separate out elements of Cameroon government, such as 5th column organizations, fighting groups that are on the ground also wreaking havoc. Then we have to separate out criminal elements, right? When you have lack of security, criminals come in and they propagate all sorts of nefarious activities. These 3 individuals' names were part of what they call the LGA of a splinter wing government led by Ekome Sako, and later on now, I believe, Christopher Fobine Anu. And while they started probably in 2017 as part of the legitimate leadership of Southern Cameroons trying to question independence, they quickly broke off and started doing nefarious activities, criminal activities, and probably some people believe later actually acting at the behest of Cameroon government. But by the time of this indictment, I would say most of these individuals were working outside of the framework of Southern Cameroons or Ambazonia liberation fighters is the term I would use, yes.
So how big is their particular movement? Because they're indicted for raising funds, weapons and supplies. Who are they going to and how big is their movement on the ground? Well,
separate time periods. 2018-19, I would say they really controlled a sizable chunk of the fighters, what they call the Ambazonia Restoration Forces. Today, that is negligible, right? They control 1 or 2 criminal gangs that are involved in mostly kidnappings. So their following on the ground is negligible. I would say negligible. It's pretty much 1 or 2 criminal gangs. So as I said, they started off as being part of more a broader legitimate movement and quickly broke off into profiteering.
You've made a suggestion that there's possible links to the Cameroon government. Is that to destabilize what some might call the legitimate cause of the Southern Cameroons?
Oh, yes. Yes, very definitely. I would say one of the things we are really looking forward to seeing the full indictment and the other indictments that are coming. So if I add a piece of information, simultaneous to their arrest, the home of one of the faction leaders, Christopher Fobune, was also raided by I believe the FBI. That was Monday morning, and they confiscated electronic devices. Some other homes were raided. We don't yet know which homes were raided. So this is part of an ongoing investigation. We know that the federal government is also investigating the financial side of lots of funds that were collected that never made their way. They are investigating the kidnapping, not only of this particular group. This particular group of the ARFs did some, but probably the last 2 or 3 years, it has mostly been done by a group known as Ambazonia Defense Forces, ADF, and AGOFC. that are pretty much based in the US, in Norway. The leader is in Norway, and one of the action commanders is in China, where they have been kidnapping. A few months ago, they actually kidnapped a sitting senator for ransom on any given day, a huge number. We do know that the US authorities are looking at those also. And so we're looking forward to the full report, because when you see the full indictment, where they really start tracing the sources of funds, I think many people expect and will not be surprised that if some of those funds traced would go back to members of Cameroon government, because it has really been their active policy to use fifth column groups to wreak havoc on the population as a means of sowing distrust and destabilizing the legitimate movement.
Where will this leave Yaoundé if links are made by a foreign agency such as the FBI? Because it makes it difficult to downplay it. Yes,
I think, one, I don't think those in Yaoundé would care, right? They have been caught doing a lot worse, and they haven't blinked. So I don't think individuals featuring in an indictment report, more than likely, the term that generally gets used by the federal system, they will be called unindicted co-conspirators. So in indictments, they try not to name individuals who themselves have not yet been indicted. And so if these individuals are out of Cameroon, they'll either go by suspect one or simply an unindicted co-conspirator. So it is unlikely that we will get names, but the description of the activities would likely point in that direction.
As cases like this...
I may also add that one of the key things underlying, because we have to separate out those who actually support the liberation and provide for legitimate self-defense, and which is not what we're talking here, and those who actually perpetrate criminal activity on civilian population, which is where the specific, the U.S. codes that were violated, right? So the crime here is actually providing material support for kidnapping, maiming, and otherwise killing civilians, and particularly civilians with U.S. relatives also, because there's that clause, and a lot of that has been gathering, because I would tell you that everybody from Southern Cameroon in the diaspora, almost everybody has had to pay ransom to these individuals one way or another, whether they like it or not. It is almost become, most of them no longer work. They just receive money directly or indirectly from such nefarious activities. So it comes as a big relief to many Southern Cameroonians that the government is putting, the U.S. government is putting a stop to this, and hopefully their influence, the negative influence they have on the suffering of people in Southern Cameroon really gets eliminated or minimized.
Is there a role for regional agencies, regional bodies, ECOWAS, African Union? Because it seems as if they know that this is going on, but for some reason, President Biya is allowed to walk among them.
Yes, which is, I suppose, the unfortunate story in Africa, and I wish I could say that Southern Cameroon was an exception. But I think one area we've seen really, I think, some hope. We saw what just happened with Tigray and Ethiopia. Countries like South Africa, Kenya, I would say the more responsible governments, and maybe your preceding segment may negate my statement, but the more responsible governments may become more forceful. Groups such as the Tana group, which was actually active, the Tana Commission that was active in the Tigray settlement, they can step in because they have moral authority. They have moral authority. We can count less on the regional bodies that are whose hands are politically tight, I may say. But those like the Tana group with moral authority have to step up and find a way of forcing both sides to the table. I mean, legitimately to the table, right? Not simply, right now there are rumors of some talks about talks that, would take forever, but while it's taking forever, people are dying every day on the ground.
Just how bad is the situation in the southern Cameroon's part of the country? We often reduce it to Anglophone, Francophone, but I know that it's not that simple.
No, it is not. I was talking to people in Bamenda just this morning. The situation is horrible. The Cameroon government in the past few months has escalated, has literally, and Bamenda is the chief town, the chief commercial capital, the commercial main town, the capital is Boya, but the commercial main town of Southern Cameroon, the largest population. The Cameroon government has essentially gone up and dug up all the roads. If you think about what the French did to Guinea-Bissau as they were pulling out with the exit from colonialization, this is essentially what we're seeing. A destruction of society as it stands. You have military barracks in almost all schools. 2 weeks ago, the military killed a child in school, and the students, we're talking 12 to 14-year-olds, had to actually use stones against active military in their school. Then you throw in the kidnappings, right? I will tell you that I myself personally, my sister 3 weeks ago was rounded. She works in a hospital. And forces, I believe, we believe it's Ambazonia Defense Forces with Cho Ayaba in Norway, came in and collected all the staff and demanded that every family member pay 500,000 before they were released. Every single day you'd call somebody, either somebody has been kidnapped, killed, or otherwise molested. So while we don't see the direct confrontational fighting inside the city itself has just devolved into a lack of rule and order. And a lot of this is perpetrated by soldiers in civilian clothes. You can tell, the population can tell from their accent, since they are mostly French-speaking. Then also the fifth column groups that many believe are being funded directly or indirectly by the Cameroon government. So the situation is really, really bad. What we see, and most people are beginning to describe, is this is really, with the exception of maybe Western Sahara, we're seeing the last case of colonialization in Africa towards its end, but with all the negative vestiges that many countries face as they try to end colonialization, right? I think Southern Cameroonians clearly say that this is a case of Africa on Africa colonialization. And we are seeing what the British did in Kenya as they were about to pull out what the French did to Guinea-Bissau. That is essentially what we see happening right now with Southern Cameroon. And if we could possibly, the international community could possibly enforce a way to get observers, because all of this is being done without much coverage because observers are not allowed on the ground. Médecins Sans Frontières has been banned from the area. Almost no NGO is allowed to operate, or journalists allowed to operate, or pictures being taken or circulated without government censorship. So it makes it very difficult to air out or to disseminate information about all the atrocities that are taking place. But once again, we really hope that what the US government has started doing is a first step. We hope that many more comes. We hope it also matches it with sanctions against identified members of the Cameroon government that are participating in these atrocities. Here we're talking about the leadership of the B, the leadership of the SED, where they have the torture chambers that are torturing a lot of the individuals. And I would also add ministers of government that directly are responsible for some of these agencies that are committing the atrocities on the ground. These individuals are well known to the international community. The US government knows them very well. And lots of them have their bank accounts and resources in the West. And so if the US starts enforcing Russia-type sanctions on the government of Cameroon, I strongly believe that they will come to the table very quickly to negotiate an end to this crisis, and this war especially.
Professor Ndofor, always good talking to you. Thanks for giving us an update tonight. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And that's where we leave that story. That was Professor Herman Ndofor from the Indiana University Keeley Business School talking to us about this development. 3 Cameroon nationals have been indicted, arrested for funding kidnapping activities, supplying weapons, raising funds rather to supply weapons and for nefarious activity inside Cameroon.